So East Africa is drowning, not just in floods, but also in debt. Yesterday, it rained so heavily that cars were getting submerged in water. We can blame God for giving us the heavy rains, but it has a lot to do with our governments. Listen, Uganda's debt is currently at 126 trillion Uganda shillings, about 35 billion US dollars. Kenya's debt is currently at 12 trillion Kenya shillings, about 94 billion US dollars. However, in the previous financial year, Uganda's revenue stood at 31.6 trillion Uganda shillings, about only 8 billion US dollars. In Kenya, the revenue was 2.57 trillion Kenya shillings, about 19.7 billion US dollars. But did you know that out of all that, we pay interest on these debts, and the debt servicing for Kenya was 1.6 trillion Kenya shillings, about 12.3 billion US dollars. And I need you guys to understand that paying interest is not paying the loan. Anyways, Uganda's debt service was 20 trillion Uganda shillings, about 5.6 billion US dollars. The math versus the politics. Now listen, I've always asked myself why governments cannot just make budgets that are within the revenue they have collected instead of borrowing, and why they can never reach out to private citizens with money, because I'm sure Uganda, Kenya, we have billionaires who could actually construct hospitals, and the answer is one: greed. And apparently those guys make a lot of money from giving these contracts to themselves, because they'll be in charge of the control, they'll be in charge of who they hire, they'll be in charge of inflated costs. And some of the case studies are this: in Uganda, we have the most expensive road in the world, which is the Entebbe Express. It cost us 476 million US dollars, but up to date we are still paying that money. The road was constructed in 2018. At the same time, we had to construct the SGR, and we had to approach the same bank, Exim Chinese bank, to give us the loan, but they refused to give us the loan because of our previous failures to pay. At the same time, in Uganda, there's a hospital known as Lubowa Hospital. It was suggested back in 2019, and they were supposed to finish constructing it in 2021. But as I speak, that hospital is still under construction, almost 7 years later, with billions pumped in. And the funniest part, it only has 284 beds for a population of over 45 million people. In Kenya here, just last week, they announced that 1.4 trillion Kenya shillings was missing from the e-citizen system. They say if you want to understand the situation, follow the numbers. In East Africa, no salary can finance the lifestyle that politicians live. I have only understood today that politicians eat contracts just like pastors eat tithe. I took off time to look at countries like Switzerland, and it is only today that I understood that in Switzerland, the citizens literally vote on projects that are going to be undertaken. And so the problem with East Africa is not just a lack of money or a lack of intelligence, but a lack of integrity.